Awesome. Okay. So I did this really cool thing with my sync course takers, and I took a poll to just ask them what they would like to learn more about when it comes to gut health. And I was surprised, but not surprised to find that a lot of people just want the application. They want to know, what do I eat? When do I eat it? They want to be told what to do to kind of take the guesswork out of the equation for themselves. But there was also a good percentage of people who really wanted to better understand root cause, like really getting to the root of food sensitivities and understanding causes for gut imbalances. So I know I sent you the poll report. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, it was really good. I love the questions that came up and the questions that you asked. They were good and kind of top 5 line things. And all of them, definitely things that I talk about in my book, and, some of the ways that we can apply, across the board, but then where we have to get more individualized and how you can't just have one plan for everyone. But you can have common ground and a common goal, right? So that was interesting, because I always find when people are like, your top line thing, you said like 35% said, give me that set plan. And I find that, yeah, you can give sample meal plans, you can give grocery lists, you can do things like that, but then people have to know what to do with them. And they need more hand holding through that. And that's where health coaches can really come in and do a great job. But at the end of the day, it's the individual that has to take ownership for their health. And there's just so many busy working parents that, they just want it all done for them. But then when it is done for them, they don't like the taste of it. They don't, it's not to their preferences. People have different sensitivities. So there is some nuance in it. And there's no one right diet for everyone or anyone at any point in their life. And there's not even a right diet that we need for life, right? Like it kind of changes a little bit as we go along. Mm-hmm. I think the most important thing is learning, the healthful basics. And that's what I go through with a lot of my patients are the healthful basics. And what I cover in chapter 4 of Beyond Digestion, one bite at a time, is, we have, we are all human beings. We all have organs and skin and hair and nails and energetic needs. And we make, brain chemicals, and we make hormones. And, so we have common needs of proteins, good healthful proteins. We have common needs of complex carbohydrates and common needs of healthy fats. I mean, our brain's 60% fat. We want to give it good fat. Every cell in our body has fat. And if we give it healthy fats, it creates a fluid membrane. So we can get, information in and out, toxins out, nutrients in. So, I mean, those are the common grounds. But then when you go beyond that, yeah, you can make grocery lists. You can look at, did I get enough, vegetables, what are the right kinds of fats, that kind of thing. So yeah, those types of things can be guided and directed, and then some sample meal plans around that. But you do need to get individualized, which kind of led into your second question, which was food sensitivities. Teach me about those things and testing.
Well, before we get to that though, and this ties in great. I've just finished your book this weekend, and I don't remember what the person's name was in your case study or your example, but you were talking about in one section where it was food sensitivity testing and doing that kind of work with people that sometimes then gives them, I don't want to say the motivation, but the drive to then move forward with eliminating certain foods or eating in a certain way. And I think that's so key, because I've found, I've been health coaching, and this is sort of my jam, like providing people with sample meal plans and sample grocery lists, and just kind of trying to make it easier, trying to make it more convenient for them to follow a plan so that they see results. However, in doing that for 12 years, I've seen that if people aren't, it's kind of like there's no skin in the game, for number one, right? Because it's like, okay, well, you're just giving me this, but do I really need to follow it? And number two, it's like they don't understand why. And if you don't understand why, it's really hard to stay motivated.
Exactly. You have to teach a man to fish.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just keep giving him fish. You got to teach him to fish. That's important. Absolutely. So you got to teach them how to go out and do it, and why you're going out to do it to some extent. It doesn't have to be totally, nitty gritty detailed, but it's just like, the basics. And that helps, helps in the learning process of taking care of our bodies, because food is medicine, right? It makes a difference.
And don't you think too, that I know for me, I look back on like my early 20s, and I always joke, my husband and I, when we were first married, of course, we were high school and college sweethearts, and we went straight to the most convenient meals, like the boxed packaged meals or the frozen dinners, or let's throw a frozen pizza in tonight, make it easy, right? And I think that a lot of Americans are following what they think is sort of the more convenient diet. they think it's easier. So when you say something to them like, hey, let's chop up some vegetables and you're going to roast them and this, it sounds more complicated. I know from my perspective now, of course, it's been a journey, right? Like the last 12 years, I started with, okay, let's ditch the hamburger helper and let's move more toward, let's buy some vegetables this time at the grocery store. Like it was a small, slow process of sort of an overall staircase. But where I am now with it is like, I can't imagine the fact that something like that took 20 minutes. And I think about, I could make a salad and roast vegetables in the same amount of time. Like it's literally the same amount of time. It's just a matter of learning how to do it and being willing to kind of, be in that transition, like to learn the steps of healthy cooking.
Yeah, once you get over the learning curve of anything, and even if you had like 5 basic healthy meal, like supper time recipes that we do a lot of cook ahead to make things easier so that when you're coming home, you can pull things out and, some things are fresh, some things are frozen, and then you can kind of mix and match. And making these food blocks, I call them, in the freezer, in the fridge, so that you're able to pull those things together and you're not doing a full cook every night. You're making it a little simpler. But once you have kind of a set, here's my 5-star recipes that I can just go to, I don't even need to think about it.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a little bit more straightforward because you know what you're going to do. So getting over that, but it takes time. And I always say it's evolution, not revolution. You have to kind of, you got to pick your battles. And if it means getting vegetables in, say it's okay, let's just aim on getting more vegetables in the diet. That could be your first step. And, let's entertain what are all the different types of vegetables and what do you do with them? Like you've got your lettuces and your bitter greens, which help stimulate digestive juices. You've got all your cabbage, or sometimes they're called the cruciferous or brassica family, your broccoli, your kale, your cauliflower, your Swiss chard, your kohlrabi, your turnips, those types of things. And they can be raw, dipped in hummus. They could be roasted, steamed, whatever. So many
Turnip
different
fries are the
ways.
bomb, by the way. Turnip
Oh,
fries, have you had them?
yeah.
Yes, they're my favorite.
And I mean, it's just as simple as chopping up the vegetable, tossing it in some nice olive oil, throwing some good quality, I love gray sea salt, throwing that on and throwing them in the oven, right? And while they're in the oven, you can prep the salad, set the table, right? And you can have a meal on the table in 30 minutes. Not a big deal. And you can cook ahead. And then you've got, those are great, cooked and cooled potatoes, for example, have resistant starch in them, which are great for feeding the microbiome. Well, hello, salad on the lunch next day, right? So you can throw things, throw your roasted veg into the salad the next day, which makes it really nice. So just kind of, thinking ahead a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we talked on the previous podcast about food sensitivities and whatnot, and we talked a little bit about fiber intake. But I think it's important to elaborate on a little bit. We actually help care for my dad. He's disabled and he stays with us sometimes while my mom goes on trips. And he was with us a couple of weeks ago. And while he has come a long way in the last 10 years, just for anyone listening, like when I was in high school, this is a great story. I grew up on a farm, a cattle farm, and we had some form of beef and potato almost every single night. So it was either steak and potato or burgers and fries, like all the time. And I remember in high school, I sat down at the table one night and I was so sick of like the meat and potatoes that I said, I made the gutsy suggestion of, I was like, I think I'm just going to be a vegetarian. And it was half sarcastic, half teenage, rebellion.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, he stood up at the table and he was like, to your room. Like that was like the most insulting thing I could have ever said.
Oh.
And I went to bed without dinner that night. But it's funny because when people say to me like, well, how does your family react around the way you eat? Right? Like you eat a lot of vegetables or lean proteins and stuff. And I tell them the first 5 or so years of our transition, which again was a slow step up the staircase, was met with a lot of rebellion on my parents' part, right? Or on our loved ones. Like I can remember being at a family reunion and my husband and I were we had eaten before because we had a feeling it was going to be fried chicken and different things. And we had eaten before and we filled our plates with like watermelon slices and things that were at the buffet that we could eat. And we were totally content. Like there was, no reason for us to not be content. And I'll never forget my mom standing up in front of the entire family and being like, of course, there's nothing here for you to eat. I should have known, and it's like, we've definitely been in that position where we felt like the outsider, and where it was a journey of really having to stand our ground and say, no, like, this is important to us. We've learned a lot about food sensitivities, and it's hard. That's something that we could talk about. I probably till I'm blue in the face, is I'm now witnessing this with friends who are dealing with maybe their children have food sensitivities. And so now they're navigating the waters of not just the school environment, but also social environments for their children. And how do they navigate that? So, I mean, we could go a lot of different directions, but I say all this to say that, like, when my dad was with me a few weeks ago, we have some non-negotiables in my house. And it's funny because my mom will say, your father is never going to eat that at your house. And I'm like, oh, he will. Like, you wait. He's not going to have any option, and he's here for the week. So I'm sure he's not going to starve. So we'll have, we had steaks, and we had different things that I knew he would like, but there was always a vegetable on the plate. And for lunches every day, he would say, if you want to just pick me something up while you're out. And I'm like, well, I don't do that, Dad. So I'll make you something, so I would still make him like his sandwiches, but he's used to like sandwich and chips. He's used to sort of like a potato, a meat, a bread, and there's just not a lot of vegetables, but he's having some issues with like his blood. They're starting to see, he's very sedentary from his disability. So lots of clotting potential. So he's on blood thinners. He gets his blood checked every week. And my mom says to me last week, now remember, I've been on this journey now for over a dozen years. She says, well, the doctor told us that he needs to eat more leafy green vegetables for his blood. And I'm like, yes, yes, yeah, that's accurate. So anyways, I share this. I'm sure my mom would be mortified, but I share it because I think a lot of Americans are eating that way. I think a lot of Americans are eating not enough fiber, not enough vegetables. They're filling themselves up with like the meats and the breads and the cheeses and the starches. And I think you're right. Like, just incorporating, like, let's just saying, I'm going to add a vegetable to my plate. Like, what's something from this meal that I should eliminate? Like, maybe it's the potato chips, and what's something that's good that I could add, and just start with that and slowly work your way forward.
It's a good step, right? One bite at a time, bite at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think, and sugar too, of course, is its own animal. I just saw yesterday where they're now calling Alzheimer's like type 3 diabetes because of the close link to sugar and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting to me, because I hear people say, especially as a parent of littles, I hear it often that, that it's almost like a reward that children should be able to have the ice cream, or they should be able to have the candy and all this. It's crazy to me. Sort of the societal norms around it for children. And I've heard this from mothers too, like, well, I'll have dessert at the party for the kids, or we'll have this for the kids. And it's like, well, do we not realize that, like, if we're feeding our children the sugar in their early years, like, then they're going to crave more sugar. And so as they get older, that's never going to go away. Right. And so if that follows them through life, this sort of like sugar crashing situation, and this, this craving of constant refined sugar, we're setting them up for a terrible, terrible health future. So yeah, anyways. Okay. So a few things that I wanted to talk about as it pertained to like food sensitivity testing. We talked last time about IgE and IgG and the difference between the two. What would you say? Do you think that most people are living day to day with some form of food sensitivity?
I mean, that I see a lot of it in practice, because that's what people come to see me for, is because they have issues with skin rashes, gas, pain, bloating, IBS of some form, whether it's constipation, diarrhea, or alternating. And often it's related to the health of the gut and whether or not there's a food sensitivity. And you pretty much are doing both, right? You're working on the microbiome, and you're looking at foods that you're sensitive to, because if you're eating a food you're sensitive to, it's creating inflammation in your body, right? This is the body's response. What that inflammation looks like might be different in different people. So it might be a headache, it might be brain fog, it might be a skin rash, it might be even like a mood shift or change, right? So and it's sometimes subtle, and it takes a little bit of, detective stuff, because the IgG, or the food sensitivity kind of response, can be anywhere from 3 minutes to 3 days. So it's subtle, right? And then you've eaten so much within that period of time, it's like, oh, what was it? You don't really know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely see it a lot. But I think people feel unwell, like, many start to complain, oh, I'm getting old, I feel old, joint pains. Oh, it's just, just must be age.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yes, there's some wear and tear with age for sure. But I think largely we can feel a whole lot better if we can identify what's causing that inflammation,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So that we can slow down that aging process, right? You
Yeah.
talk about anti-aging. Yeah, this is one of them. And reducing inflammation. I mean, inflammation is your onset to any type of chronic disease like cancer or diabetes or autoimmune disease or things like that. These are all inflammatory conditions and often begin in the gut.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the documentary that my husband and I watched a couple of years ago, but it was focused in on plant-based diets, and it was talking about a couple of athletes who had almost career ending, well, what they thought was going to be career ending injuries or illnesses, and how they completely turned their diet upside down to be a more plant-based diet and anti-inflammatory diet, and how they were able to come through that recovery so much quicker and easier. Is that, what do you know about that? I guess when it comes to, recovering. I mean, I have another, this is another example. I have another friend. We met this person at the farmer's market actually, and he was selling his book, which he had self-published. And I read the book. It was all about different foods, and it's the different, how foods impact the body differently. And he was talking about how he received like a stage 4 cancer diagnosis and decided to go completely plant-based, and just started diving into nutritional benefits of different foods, and just sort of went crazy on changing the way he ate, and was able to come through the cancer. He's still obviously living today, working at the farmer's market, handing out his book, trying to spread the message. What do you know about this?
Um, Definitely. I mean, I advocate more plant-based foods, not the ones that they're manufacturing and adding food dyes to. No, but just getting more plant-based foods in your diet. I still advocate an omnivorous diet, so eating some meat. That's all. I think that, as long as that's resonating with the person, but we shouldn't judge somebody if they choose not to eat meat. We just want to make sure they're getting complete protein,
Mhm.
right? But we also know that we need a lot of vegetables. We need like 6 to 10 cups of veggies a day.
Mhm.
And some people are scrambling to get one and thinking that ketchup is it. And I mean, ketchup is actually a fruit from tomato. Tomatoes is a fruit, and ketchup is
Without
actually
sugar,
mostly
right?
sugar. It's mostly sugar and food dye in most cases. So, I mean, it's not even really a food group.
Yeah.
But this is what people argue on the extreme, right? So it's yeah, plant-based foods are so, but you have to think there's over 50, was it 50, 500,000 phytonutrients inside of plants, and
Mhm.
we're still discovering more. I
Yeah.
mean, they're a large part of what's sitting in the, my tincture cabinet here are plant medicines that are basically extracted from plant material, right? Not necessarily ones you'd eat in bulk on your plate, but plants are so wise and they're here for us for a reason,
Mhm.
and they offer medicinal purposes in small quantities, whether they're glycerol, alcohol, or water extracted, or on your plate. These
Mhm.
things, food is medicine and plants are medicine, and understanding how to eat them and how to combine them can be can be very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And extremely helpful. Does that not mean that meat doesn't offer? Yeah, so grass-fed meat, things that are kind of more roaming on the range, not pumped full of hormones and antibiotics, are very helpful. They're going to give us our iron and our B12 and some great mineral contents. Do we need to eat it in as excess that maybe that's being consumed currently in the average diet? Maybe not. Maybe it's smaller quantities. If you look more to the Asian diet, they do varied types of proteins, but not in big quantities, right? In
Right.
smaller quantities. Or, you know, in the more hunter gatherer, they go out, once a month and they get they have an animal that they've,
Mhm.
that they've harvested, and that is a big feast. But then they're eating plant-based foods, in between those big feasts. It's not a
Right.
big feast every night or 3 times a day.
Yeah. Yeah. Over the course of um, the last few years for me, my husband and I have played with different things. And there was a phase of time a few years ago where we decided we had done a cleanse that took us off of all animal product. And I felt really good. It was a very anti-inflammatory diet, 3 weeks long. And I felt amazing. I just had better energy. I was sleeping better. And I had convinced myself that this was the right way to go. And so we went completely, he did it with me, and he's like, wow, well, I feel great. Like, let's do it this way. So we spent probably 2 years, I would call us mostly vegan. Because we had started sort of our dairy-free life at that point, and we would occasionally have fish. So that was our only exception. And while we felt really good for a short period of time, it started to have ramifications for me, with my B12 and my iron. And my doctor kept saying to me, like I would go in and I would say, for some reason, I'm running out of energy in my workouts. Now, if you looked at me, if you looked at my picture from that phase of life, I was extremely lean, extremely fit. But yet I couldn't hold a wall squat for 2 minutes because I felt like I didn't have the energy to do it. And so my doctor kept saying, I think we can supplement you, but I really think we need to look at, maybe animal meats are going to be good for you for that heme iron. So I went back to it. And when I went back to it, it was like, I would say 6 months later, I started to feel like myself. Like I started to feel like I got that energy back. So I totally hear what you're saying. And I think, of course, everybody's different. There's going to be people who have, spiritual or personal reasons why maybe animal product is not part of their diet. And I totally respect that. There's also people who, like me, who I could probably be happy to live without meat. But at the same time, I know my body thrives better with it. So you talk about in your book, and I wanted to ask you about this because this was something that my doctor had mentioned to me during that time. And it's the blood type diet. Not many people have heard of this. So I would love for you to sort of explain it and maybe the science behind it, as well as your feelings about it.
Yeah, I found it very interesting. I mean, I'd heard about it in naturopathic college years ago, and I thought, okay, because I was always, exploring different things and trying to find, what worked. And I know when I did a 3-month vegan stint, and initially felt well, but then afterwards I was just like, oh, this isn't for me, and I wonder why. And then I learned a little bit more about the blood type, and I was like, and then when I was writing my book, I'm like, oh, I should really dig into this. So I did. I read through the book, and really what it's based on is we have different blood types. So we have AB, we have A and B and O, right? And then you have your rhesus factors, your rhesus positive or negatives, but we're really looking more so on the A's, B's, and O's. And this is based on where our ancestry comes from. A lot of Mediterranean types of descents are, ABs or A or B, and then more of the Northern European, you see more O. What they find, and what I've, incidentally found in clinic too, and what I find in myself, is that the O's do better with like meat and having meat in their diet. And then some of the, and I'd have to look back to see exactly, because it caught me off the cuff here on a Monday morning. But some have more sensitivities to lectins. Okay. And this is where the blood type, the lectins come in, because they use lectins to help identify the A and the B blood types. So this is where you find that some people are more sensitive to lectins than not. And some people with type B are sensitive to things even like chicken or stuff like that, that you think, wow, well, somebody, sensitive to chicken. And then some do better with dairy and some not with dairy. So there is, I can see you're kind of looking to see if you can find it. There is some science behind why you might be sensitive genetically to different foods. And we know, like, even with like lactose, like the milk, most Asians will lose their lactose or their lactase enzyme, which is the enzyme that helps break down the sugar in milk, the lactose, and they don't drink dairy beyond childhood or have any dairy in their diet, so to speak. Whereas the Northern Europeans tend to hang on to that a little longer and be able to things. And that's where you see a lot of the cheeses and stuff like that coming into the Northern European diet, as opposed to the Asian diet, kind of those things. Yeah. But, when we're in this mixed cultural environment worldwide now, and, as we go, down the rope, we see such a melting pot of different things, and no one right diet's, right for anyone. But sometimes the blood type is an interesting one just to consider. And they've had really good luck. I think they used it in the, I think it was Miss America pageant models. They would use this diet and allow them to eat according to their blood type. And it worked amazingly well for them to keep lean and fit. And not that everybody needs to be looking like Miss America, but they were able to find ways to have them be healthy and fit or slim at the same time. And essentially, a slimness could mean, just not inflamed, not bloated,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
Yeah.
So there is science behind it, and there is evidence there. And I know, there was a lady that wrote into the Townsend letter, and she had done some more. She'd actually done a PhD on some of this as well. So there's plenty of scientific evidence supporting it, and interesting, and something to take into consideration to help you understand, why you might find one type of diet, a vegan or vegetarian, or a pesco vegetarian, or a paleo. What is your basis that might make you feel best?
Yeah.
And help you understand that more.
And it takes trial and error sometimes. I think about the fact that we went from hamburger helper to making the small steps toward, adding more vegetables and eliminating processed foods. My husband had a huge Oreo addiction, so we got rid of that in our 20s. And then it just slowly morphed. And then we did this cleanse, and it brought us to veganism, which was almost like an extreme opposite. Like, okay, we just went totally to the other extreme. But then we learned that maybe I learned that wasn't best for my body, and I needed to incorporate some meat, right? So then we played around with a little pescatarian, and then we added red meat back in. And I would call myself mostly paleo at this point. And that's what works for me, but it's not something that I just decided on. And I had to listen to my body and pay attention to, I always say I measure everything in energy. So I had to pay attention to my energy. What was my energy? What was my sleep? How was my focus? And if you're still experiencing different things, like for me, it was like not having the energy to put into a workout. I knew that something was off for me. And so, oh gosh, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Okay. So see, I opened the book, and now here we go. Okay. But before we do that, I want to ask you this. So I recently interviewed Dr. Michelle Jorgensen, who is a functional dentist who has sort of blown my mind with oral health information, to the point where I think I told you my teeth have been hurting thinking about it. But I also really want to talk about this idea of parasites. And I know in your book, you talk about some, symptoms that people can spot right off the bat. So let me back this up a little bit. My personal story, and maybe it's best if we touch on that first. My personal story is, I did have a parasite coming home from our honeymoon in Mexico. I had a really bad second half of our honeymoon. I think it was E. coli that I got on the honeymoon in Mexico, and had to go on an anti-parasitic and all that kind of stuff when I got home. I would say, in that moment, I was definitely experiencing the parasite as far as the sort of acute symptoms. But after hearing Dr. Jorgensen speak about, root canals and cavitations and different things like wisdom teeth removal and all these sort of things that can sort of manifest parasites down into the gum and down into the root of the tooth, it's gotten me thinking about my oral history and what I've had there. And so my question for you is, the most interesting thing that I've seen is, and this is really the reason that I even thought maybe I had a parasite to begin with, was I started following this doctor on Instagram, who this is sort of her area and her specialty. And she was talking every single month when there's a full moon, or every time there's a full moon, she talks about the serotonin levels and the melatonin levels and what shifts in the moon, which causes people who have underlying parasites to have symptoms around that full moon. Is this something that you've heard about and are familiar with?
Well, it's interesting. I know parasites have a cycle.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised that they go around like a lunar cycle, right? Because it's just part of nature has rhythms.
Yeah.
Right. And circadian rhythms, and these bugs in our gut have rhythms. We know this. So it's not surprising. And we even see seasonally sometimes, like I see seasonally with Lyme's disease, you'll see it, the symptoms are more prevalent often, in mid to late summer. You'll see this, symptoms kind of flare in some people. And then they kind of go dormant in the winter. So it's yeah, there's some kind of rhythm definitely going on, and because they can encapsulate, right, and kind of hide from what's happening, and then they can come out again. They have a life cycle that they go through, and in what they're doing, and as they're going through their life cycle, they will cause different aggravations in your body depending on where they're at in their life cycle.
Yeah.
So this is critically important. So to understand and recognize, because when we're doing a parasitic cleanse, we need to take a break, right? We do a cleanse for 15 days, and then we take a 5-day break. and then you go at it again, because you don't want them to all go dormant on you to evade what you're trying to do, right? They'll be like, oh, something, so they'll kind of hide.
Mhm.
So you want to catch them while they're vibrant. So you want to kind of
Right.
give it a little break, let them kind of go, oh, it's safe to come out again, and then hit them again.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
So this is important.
yeah, and this doctor that I've been following has talked about how you don't want to start. She advocates this sort of cellular cleanse. And she was talking about you don't necessarily want to start it, on a full moon. Like you want to start it maybe after the full moon and really sort of she talks about drainage pathways and getting the drainage pathways prepared so that these parasites can be eliminated. The
Yeah.
stories I've heard around this, I just started this program called CellCore, which is what she endorses, and my doctor's behind it as well. So we just started it, and it's interesting because last month in June, we were actually on vacation. I had just ended my round with COVID, was feeling good, did some exercise on vacation, was feeling great. And then all of a sudden, like halfway through the week, I just got slammed with this massive migraine, which for me, that's sort of my MO, right? Like, and I seem to have these migraines around a full moon. And even, I think back and I think to the fact that like, even when I had my headaches in the very best shape ever, I would say I would have 25 days a month where I felt great. And then like 3 to 5 days around that full moon that just, I couldn't get it good during that time. And so I've always just thought, based on my hormone knowledge and what I've been experiencing with that perhaps it was just estrogen dominance, because I would always ovulate around the full moon as well. So I would see, thanks to my saliva patterns, I would see that my estrogen was rising. I knew that my body was progesterone deficient. So I would start to say, okay, there must be this huge ratio is off, right, during ovulation. And so I would increase my progesterone. I would double up my estrogen detoxification. I would do everything to try to bring that ratio down. And it's like, no matter what I would do, even to this day, it doesn't always work. That being said, in June, I'm on vacation and I get this massive migraine just out of the blue, probably one of the worst ones I've ever had. And it was like 3 days long. It was just like, I would go to bed, wake up, and it was there. It was for 3 days. I thought I was going to get sick in my stomach. It was terrible. And I wasn't even thinking about the moon. And I remember my husband, like the third night of this migraine, I said, okay, I'm going to bed again early because I feel terrible. And he's like, he's like, before you go to bed, here we had this place on the beach. He's like, you got to go out and see the moon. He's like, it's so pretty. So we go outside and it's just this, and I'm like, of course it's a full moon. Like, why didn't I think of that? Like, of course. And it's like, as soon as the full moon ends, I feel this slow, like I slowly feel better. Like, so if the full moon's on a Friday, Saturday, I feel a little bit better. Sunday, I feel even better. Monday, I'm like back to normal. It is the weirdest. It's like this slow titration up and down. Like I follow the moon pattern so closely. And so listening to this doctor who specializes in this cellular cleanse, I told my doctor about it. She said, yes, she's done it herself. She said, let's get you on board with it. So we started it. I started it last month, as soon as we got home from vacation, maybe like 4 or 5 days after we got back and I was starting to feel better. I started this. And it's been really interesting because we have a full moon coming up tomorrow, I believe. I think it starts tomorrow, and they're saying it's the largest super moon of 2022. I forget what the name of it is, but it's supposed to appear like a full moon for 3 full nights. So Tuesday through Friday. So we'll see how this week goes for me. But I woke up this morning and I was shocked that I didn't have any signs of headache, like heading into this full moon. So we'll see how this experience goes. But when I tell women this, I spoke on a call recently and women were surprised to hear that we are lunar beings. Like, and I think it's so interesting. It's like we've become such a like cement society. Like we're indoors all the time. It's like the moon is still working outside there. The sun and the moon are still rising.
There's still that universal pull.
Yeah.
And as you're finding on your journey, Jenny, it's never one thing. I mean, you try to get to the root cause, and you can keep, and I talk about this in the book, it's like peeling layers of the onion, right? You're always peeling another layer of your healing. And, as you're doing that, you get to a deeper layer, and then you get to a deeper layer. And we do it I think it's part of our soul's journey, right? It's our ability that we encounter things as we're ready to unpeel them, right? Yeah. And to look at the next layer. And I always, so it's hormones, but hormones also, coincide with the moon. Could
Yeah.
it be parasites? Yes, it could be parasites. And yes, they might have a lunar cycle as well that we see things. So it could be not just one thing, it could be both things kind of working in tandem. And this is why. And yes, cellular detox is important. I do biotherapeutic drainage in my practice as well. And it is highly effective. And you have to open up, we always say, you open up the organs, the emunctory organs or the organs of detoxification first, so that they're ready and primed to process what you're going to take out of the cell. Because if the liver and kidneys and the lymphatics aren't ready to process junk, if they're still hanging on to junk themselves, you've got to clean that out first. It's like cleaning out the gutters in the springtime. You have to do that in order to be prepared for the hard rain, because if you don't, it just floods and backs up. Right. So we're no different. Our lymphatics are like our sewer system. It's our secondary, our secondary circulation system. And we have, it's where 30%, of our immune resides. It's the immune inside our body. Around 70% is in our gut. And then the other 30%, floating around our bloodstream or in our lymphatics. So, this is critically important, but we have to make sure that those aren't clogged up, right? You have to think lymph nodes. Lymph nodes get clogged up when we think of, terminal stages of cancer. But they can be clogged when it's not cancerous. They can just be sludgy and not moving. And this can cause a lot of sinus problems. This can cause headaches. This can cause joint pains, things like that. So we need, so it's looking at that cell, getting those cellular pathways ready to detox. And sometimes we don't have to know all of the details as to what exactly are we detoxing. We just have to make sure that we're doing, healthful practices, open up those organs, then go in and do the cellular detox and then support it. Don't go too fast, right? You've got to go fast enough, but if you go too fast, you can feel a little fluish, get that Herxheimer reaction, they call it, or, just feeling a bit off because you've just, flooded your body with toxins, too fast. So you can support that with, minerals and vitamins to help with those, physiological processes, those biomechanics of what we need to do to detox things. So there's all sorts of support around that. That's important.
Yeah. I think the phrase that this particular person that I've been following has used is like, she calls it kill, bind, sweat. And so she talks about, opening up the drainage pathways and then really encouraging your body to sweat each day, whether it's through exercise, or she's a huge fan of the sauna. I'm not sure what you believe. Are you a sauna fan?
The infrared saunas, there is good research behind it. Some people find it highly effective to go in for like up to like 20 minutes a day type of thing. Some people do longer, but you got to be prepared for that. But yeah, so what that does, and I'll even use like I have a lamp in the office when I'm doing acupuncture. I'll put on the skin, but it's infrared. It mobilizes the tissues beneath the skin, so it helps with that detoxification. So it helps with that. So it's a different type of heat, right?
Yeah.
You have to think there's so much to be said for heat and sonar or sound healing, right? Like light and sound. Light and sound is how the universe was born, and light and sound is how we are healed.
Yeah.
It's vibration. They're all vibrations. We are vibrational beings, and we see and experience vibration through light and sound.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I recently did a solo round podcast on the benefits of earthing. And the science there is fascinating. Like the fact that we are like electrically connected to the earth. I mean, it's, it sounds silly to say, but also makes total sense.
It's like, why wouldn't we be? Every single cell, it has a positive and a negative polarity. This is how MRIs work. Like, I mean, you go to get an MRI for what they do is they're taking all of the hydrogen molecules and aligning them with that big magnet to all go into the same direction. And then they take the magnet away and they see how do the cells go back to where they were. And they're measuring the speed at which they do, and they're measuring how far they go back, how far they needed to go back, and to where they're operating. And this is how they detect disease. Yeah, this is science, right? This is not woohoo stuff. This is this is science.
It's fascinating.
We're electromagnetic for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I say this in the solo round too, we started my daughter at a preschool program 3 years ago, and we really didn't know what we were doing. I knew that I wanted time to work at home, and I needed her to be in some sort of 2 day a week something so that I could have more time, and that she needed it. She needed the socialization. And so we fell into this program. It was an outdoor preschool, and we didn't know at the time. We were just like, okay, this sounds fun. It's at a local museum. And her experience there has totally changed my perspective on education. It's changed my perspective on nature. But the one thing that it's shown me is, because children teach us so much, I think, about how far away we've come as adults from sort of who we're meant to be from a nature perspective in so many different ways. Children are so empathetic. They're so outwardly emotional. And we, at some point, we learn along the way, like what's normal, what's not okay. It's not okay to cry. It's not like these different things that we learn from that perspective as we get older that children really teach us. But also I've noticed, she's so at home when she's out, like she feels uncomfortable in shoes. Like if you try to put her in shoes, even in our yard, it's like, do I have to, like, she's just so uncomfortable. She wants them off. She wants to lie in the grass. She wants to roll down the hill. And I remember we were at her preschool graduation, and my mom and dad have seen the preschool. They've been at like parent nights and that kind of stuff. But at this particular graduation, it was just like a picnic. And so the kids were all out playing. There was water hoses involved. There was a mud pit. I mean, it was a disaster, but the parents all got to see, and the grandparents all got to kind of see them in their element. And I remember at one point, Ellery was, I don't know, probably, I mean, as far as the eye could see, like, I don't think I could have seen her much further away, and she would have disappeared out of sight for me. She was that far away, but she was still on the premises, barefoot, right? Just in her little muddy shorts and tank top. And she's out with a group of boys, and they're stomping in a mud puddle way out there. And I remember the preschool directors at this preschool, which again have taught us so much, their perspective is all about risk-based play. And so the teachers are like, they're fine. They know their boundaries. They know when to come back. And so the teachers are just like, you look over at the teachers, like, I mean, I'm the mom, like, should I be worried? Like, do I need to follow? And then you see the teachers that are like, they're fine. This is what they do. And I'll never forget, my mom was there, and she said, are you just going to let her go out there without shoes? Like, are you going to let her go that far without shoes? And I said, yeah, I am. And she was like, but there's bees and who knows what in the ground. And I said, Mom, I was like, we're meant to walk on the earth, like without shoes. So it's okay. Like she's in the grass, like she's fine. And but again, it's like coming back to that sort of spectrum of like how far as we age, how far away we sort of can be from that childhood intuition. So Vitamin N, but by the way, is a great book too. And I can link that up for people, but it's taught me a lot about just connecting to nature. I know in your book, you talk about even just 20 minutes of being outside, getting fresh air, and the power that can have, not just for the vitamin D benefits and the sun, but just connecting.
So much more.
Take your shoes off is what I'm saying, regardless of the pedicure situation.
It works really great for resetting your circadian rhythms.
Yeah.
Because we're very, very circadian rhythm based, and jet lag, things like that. If you're jet lagged, one of the best things to do is to barefoot walk on the earth, or lay on the ground, or as close to the ground as you can get, for like 30 minutes, so that you can reset your rhythm to the local rhythm.
Yeah.
And that's
I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's a Chinese medicine thing, but it's very helpful, that it helps you get grounded again, literally, right? Get you grounded. And why is this important for digestion and some of these other things we're talking about, is that we have to be in that circadian rhythm. We get constipated or have gut issues with jet lag quite a bit. Why? It's that circadian rhythm that's off. And we talked about that a few minutes ago. And I think chapter 8, I talk a lot about the waves of different things and how this affects, our digestion and why it's important. But we need to get grounded. We need to reset our circadian rhythm. And in that, we need to rest and allow the nervous system to rest and engage the rest and digest side of things, right? Our parasympathetic side. So connecting to the earth, connecting to nature is one very simple yet effective way to help us downregulate our nervous system so we can digest. Because when we're in that go, 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 we're not digesting properly.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about this in the book too, like digestion from the perspective of not just what we're eating, but how we digest our environment, like our stress level
Mhm.
and all that, which is so powerful. And I didn't realize until I was finishing your book, your knowledge and expertise in the area of breath work. And that's something that I definitely wanted to ask about. This is something that um, was introduced to me by, I mean, I listened to, Lewis Howes, and I've heard of the Wim Hof method, and I've heard him interviewed
Mhm.
on different podcasts and stuff. And so I've heard of it. At the beginning, I would say I was a little bit like, okay, like this sounds a little cuckoo. But my dear friend Jen, who is the same person who started me on this holistic wellness journey and set me up with a functional medicine doctor a dozen years ago, she's my yoga instructor, and her yoga journey has brought her into breath work and meditation. And so, I always say for some reason, I feel like she was put in my life to be this mirror for me. Like we are so similar, not just in our bodies. Like she's taught me so much about progesterone, and we seem to be like sisters from another mother or something. And it's great to walk alongside somebody in life that's like you in that way. But she's also a mirror for me. It's like her life is like a mirror to me of just mentorship. And, every time I come to her stressed or struggling or, with the headache or whatever, her constant response to me is breathe.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she has we have a workshop in our course that's just a breath workshop. And it's interesting to me because when we look at the metrics, it's the most skipped module in the course. Like people are just like, I don't need the breath work, right? And it's like, no, actually, that could be the most crucial piece of the puzzle for you. So I know, I mean, in the book, you kind of break down the Wim Hof method and Ujjayi and all the different types of breath work. Do you have a favorite or a favorite way for people to start? Or what are your tips around this?
Yeah, I mean, there's different things that you would pull in, like different tools out of your toolbox at different times for different purposes. But I think that the first and foremost is just to become aware of your breath, right? Because it's an automatic process. But when I'm stressed or I'm having difficulty sleeping, or something's come up that I'm not feeling like I'm emotionally regulating well, I just bring my focus to my breath, and I first just to be aware of my breath, and then I count breaths. I count 4 breaths in and 4 breaths out. And sometimes when I'm, super stressed, even 4 count is too much, right? So you start with whatever you're comfortable with, if that's 2 or 3 breaths in, but you always want to equalize the in breath with the out breath as you're starting. So you would, count in 2, 3 and out 2, 3, right? To start kind of there. Maybe there's a music or a rhythm that would help you keep count. I know there was one of my patients, she loves Celine Dion, and she would just breathe in and breathe out to the count of her music, and that was transformational for her. There's other breaths that you would do where you would hold for a 4 count. So you would breathe in, hold for a 4 count, and then breathe out.
Mm-hmm.
And some would even add and hold for a 4 count and then breathe in. So there's so many different ways. And I met a lady in the springtime that does breath work coaching, and it's a little bit even different than some of this type of breath work. She does breath work coaching to help you release trauma from your body. She had been in a car accident and had broken multiple bones, and her body was in really super rough shape. Spent years trying to recuperate. She just got to a point where she was sick of telling everybody her story and seeing all these therapists. They could do so much. She realized that the healing was within.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say the healing's within. So she found that some of the breath work exercises that she discovered when she took a vacation to California, that they were really super helpful for releasing the trauma that was stored in the tissues of her body. So it's very, very helpful because we do store up emotions in our body, and emotions are chemicals, right? And when they get trapped, it's as similar as a parasite being in there, right? It's toxic, right? So it's built up, not processing. We're not getting the toxins out of the cell. So we come back to that whole detox. So there's different ways we can detox, different levels. And I talk about this in my book, Peeling the Onion. We do the physical layer, we do the emotional layer, we do the cognitive layer, we do the spiritual layer, and it's just kind of recognizing that what layer is your body ready to work on, what window. You're not going to do them all at once, but pick a window. And if breath work is something that you feel you're not ready for yet, okay, but keep it in mind because it's super helpful. And through the heart math program, which is one that I'm certified practitioner in, is where I first learned a lot of the breath work. Is just the power of how each beat to beat variation of your heart is tied to a signature emotion. And your heart rate variability is a stronger indicator of your health than so many other, things you would see in blood work. So you can actually affect your heart rate variability by the rhythm of your breath and your focused intention. So gratitude, love, care, appreciation, and focused intention of the breath, some visualization work, kind of these things combined together is the heart of the heart math program. And it's like a 4-week program I would take people through so that they're able to learn the skills and techniques. So it's something like a meditation, but it's a little bit different in the fact that you can actually see the biorhythms. You can hook up and see biorhythms of what's going on. And people can check out heartmath.org or heartmath.com and see the science behind what they're doing. They've been studying it since the early 1990s. And then, find, a heart math practitioner that you resonate with and do a program with them and just learn some of the techniques. Even through yoga, there, the Kundalini, the Ujjayi breath, the other types of breathing, this other breath work. So there's so many different things, the Wim Hof. And I think you'll see Wim Hof in different areas. Netflix had one on the Goop program. There was one episode on Wim Hof, and it was well done with Gwyneth Paltrow kind of leading that group. Those were her episodes. So that was, that was more like cold therapy and learning how to breathe so you can go into the cold. But cold water therapy is very calming, right?
Yeah.
Very calming to the nervous system. But the breathing techniques that come with it are critical. So yeah, there's so many different types of breathing techniques that affect our nervous system, which affect our emotional regulation, which affect the rhythms of our heart, which can shift us out of anger and frustration and anxiety into calm and peace, right? And joy. So it's learning that, we're not necessarily in charge of our emotions in the sense that they come to us and we don't make them. They kind of come to us and we need to experience them. They need to be recognized. I always say emotions need to be recognized, but they don't need to be put in charge. We do need to fully feel them in order for them to, come and go. Because when we hold on to them that, get stuck.
Yeah.
And that's where the breath work can be helpful to kind of move it through. Yeah.
Just
one way to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the cold therapy, because I saw in your book where you were talking about, speaking of lymph and all that kind of stuff, like doing sort of the cold shower, hot shower, alternating approach. I remember hearing a biohacker several years ago talking about cold showers. And so I kind of got into them around that time. And at first I was like, they say to stick with this. They say to stick with this. Like I really had to like talk myself into it. But it is interesting. Like I know for me, how much more energy I feel after a cold shower versus a hot, like after a hot shower, yes, it's relaxing, but then it's like, then I just want to go to sleep, or I just feel like I get sort of more sluggish in my body. Whereas the cold shower really sort of perks me up a little bit. But regardless, I would just wanted to mention that because we talked recently about the lymph process of those drainage pathways and the hot and cold. I think you say to do like 4 minutes of hot, 1 or 2 minutes of cold, right? As you transition into that. But also I'm thinking back to, I think this, and I say this so much, I feel like I'm a broken record. There's so much about just self-awareness that really has to start the process for people. Just like we said at the very beginning, when it comes to those meal plans, like there's only so much we can do as far as supplying that. Whereas the person themselves has to have that self-awareness that this is what's right for them and that they're going to learn why, and that they're going to stick with it intrinsically. The same thing goes for this. And I know that when my friend Jen had first introduced me to this breathwork idea, and she will laugh when she hears this, I'm sure. Shavasana is my most hated pose, which for anyone who doesn't do yoga, it's basically where you lie still. And that itself has taught me so much about who I am and my tendency to want to control and want to hold on to things and to not let go. And so when breathwork started to become part of her practice, I've sort of been with her through this journey of, in the beginning, she was so much like me as far as she wanted to do a rigorous practice. She wanted it to be sort of like a workout so that you could relax at the end. And I was down for that. I was like, I can do this. Like, this is like a fitness workout. Like I can do it. I can lay still for 5 minutes at the end if it means I'm going to get a good workout. And then slowly she got sort of more along her journey in this breath work and sort of the spiritual connection. And she started to say to me, like, she's like, stop asking me how long the Shavasana is going to be. Like, I can see it in your eyes. You're looking at me like, how long? And she said, just lie there and try to let go. And it's easy for someone to say, but it's very hard for someone to do.
Mhm.
This has been a struggle for me now for so long, like so long. And there have been points where I've been in a yoga class with her and I have felt like I needed to leave the room. Like I literally feel like my body is holding on so much to this inability to be still that I have to escape. Like I literally feel like I have to leave the room to get myself together. And then I realized that, and I said this a million times, that it's often what we resist that we need to embrace to change. And for me, it's like, I know that that is sort of my next step on my own personal growth journey, is to say, okay, now I have the self-awareness. I have the self-awareness that this is what I'm doing. I'm holding on. I am controlling. I am trying to let go. Right. And so like just repeating that to myself and getting that, taking that from awareness to application and how I can really work through that. But I interviewed Natalia Rachel. She has a book coming out this fall. She's a trauma-informed therapist, and I've loved following her on LinkedIn. She's got some powerful stuff, but her book is called Why Am I Like This? And I'll never forget meeting with her. It wasn't even on a podcast. It wasn't recorded. We were just meeting before the podcast. And she said, we were having the same conversation about breath work and stillness and all that. And I said this, I told her the same story, right? Like, this is something I'm working on. And she said, there's trauma there. She said, there's trauma there and you have to feel it. She's like, you don't have to necessarily like revisit the experiences, but you have to be okay with exactly what you just said, like feeling those emotions. And then it helps you to be in that position to let go. So without really having any direction in this story, I just wanted to say that, breath is it's kind of like, when you first hear about earthing, you're like, what? Like, I'm supposed to do what now? Like, I'm supposed to go outside, take my shoes off and walk in the grass? Like, that's what you're telling me? Yep, that's what we're telling you. And then you're telling me with the breath, I need to like inhale 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts. Yep, that's exactly what we're saying. But it doesn't make sense until you start doing it. Like, it sounds so simple, but it's like, what if the answers to everything that we have in this life, like all the struggles that we have, what if it was a simple answer? You know what I mean? Like, I think we're so used to like looking for the medicine that'll help, or finding the doctor that knows the answer, or like you said, like we are constantly peeling back the onion of wanting to know what the root cause is. And what if it's just simple? Like, what if the purpose of it is to experience it? What if the purpose of it is to have the pain? Like I think that to myself sometimes with the headaches. Like sometimes I'm like, what if this is the point? Like, what if the point of this is to slow me down? What if the point of this is for me to experience this? And ironically, yesterday, I'm a spiritual person, and yesterday's church service was just like, it like, I don't know, it like smacked me in the face, because the minister was talking about destiny, and he was talking about, and I actually pulled up the notes because I wanted to say, he shared this quote that I thought was so cool. Let's see if I can find it. I lost it. It's a Dallas Willard quote from, I guess, the book, The Divine Conspiracy. And it says, you were built to count as water is made to run downhill. You are placed in a specific context to count in ways no one else does. That is your destiny. And he talks about, in this sermon, he was talking about, this idea that your mess is your message, or that the pain that you've gone through is your purpose to help other people sort of come through that. So there's no question behind this. It's just a rant. I feel like I've been on a soapbox, but for me, it's like, for anyone listening to this who's like, Jenny has gone off the deep end. Like, now she's telling me that my breathing, we're talking about breathing, we're talking about being barefoot on the earth, we're talking about the gut microbiome and all these things that sort of seem like you're in the matrix, right? But it's like, what if it really was that simple? Like, what if it really was that simple to focus on the breath and to eat real food and to breathe correctly and sleep and de-stress our life?
One way to try it, right? It's how you
Yeah.
find out, and it's the experience. You can't just read about it. You can't just talk about it. You got to do it,
Yeah.
right? It's the experience, right? We get so stuck in our heads and we forget we have a body.
Yeah.
Right. And a heart.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to go into that heart center and work through it. And sometimes, that can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So, as we protect it.
Yeah. I think it's what we resist that we sometimes need to embrace.
Yeah. Yeah. And what you resist will persist until you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
And
I
it can
want to,
be uncomfortable, right? It can be uncomfortable, and it's learning to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, or being
yep.
comfortable with the uncomfortable, better said.
Mhm.
And so that we can fully feel that emotion that's been stuck, right? We need to, it comes up and we're like, okay, what is this? Recognize what it is. Oh, I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling, you don't need to necessarily, do a whole childhood unravel, and go back, and no,
Right.
sometimes it's just allowing that pent up emotion to fully be felt. I just feel this. We don't have to analyze it 9 ways from Sunday. We just need to feel what we're feeling, going, oh, this is what grief feels like. I'm grieving it. Doesn't matter if you know what it is, just
Mhm.
allow it, right? And when we, and in the allowing, we have to let go of the control we think we have, right? And it's not always easy, and sometimes easier to be guided or coached through that, um, in order to help you process it so that you can get
Yeah.
through the end. Because I always talk about, I help people better digest their food and the world around them.
Yeah.
And that's that second part, right? Because we digest not only our food, we
Mhm.
digest the world around
Right.
us too,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, in
Yeah,
many different ways.
absolutely. Well, I have a couple of other sort of off-topic questions if you have a few more minutes.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of them is this, I think we might have touched on it briefly, but when I was reading your book, it came up again for me. And, total disclaimer. Yes, I've had experience with hormone health and have taught myself. I like to teach myself in analogies. So that's how I learn the best. When I'm teaching on the podcast, I try to tell stories and the four-legged chair, visual and those types of things. But whenever there are sort of scientific phrases or words thrown around is where I sort of am like, like my brain just sort of beeps it out, so to speak. But I've listened to a couple of trainings recently. I'm taking a practitioner course right now, and I was listening to a couple of trainings on beta glucuronidase. I think I said it right.
Mhm.
And I think you touched on this briefly on the previous podcast, but we didn't go deeper. But anyways, I was listening to someone talking about the connection between that and estrogen dominance in
Mhm.
particular. And I was wondering if you could touch on that for us, because I love
Sure.
learning from you. I feel like when you talk, I totally understand what you're saying.
Oh, thank you. That's nice. So the beta glucuronidase, so this is something that our gut will make. And so it's something that's in our gut, in our gastrointestinal tract. Okay. So let's just back up the bus a little bit. And you're talking about estrogen dominance, and it's linked to beta glucuronidase. So our body needs to detox estrogen, right? When there's too much of it, it goes through the liver, it goes through phase 1, phase 2 detox, gets all packaged up. Okay. So when I say packaged up, you get the molecule of estrogen, and they've thrown something on it. Okay. Throwing different groups, chemical groups on it, so that it's now ready. So now it's all in a nice little package, so that, and it's labeled, it's got the little tag on it, eliminate, right? Like poop this out.
Mhm.
Okay. So then that's, so that estrogen with the poop this out, because I'm done with this estrogen tag, goes down into the gastrointestinal tract. And if we have too much beta glucuronidase, it starts to unwrap the package. And then when it unwraps the package, now the estrogen is free again. So the things that have bound it that says poop this out, it's now taking those tags off and going up. So now the estrogen's free again. It's like, I'm free. So
Mhm.
now it's going, I'm going back into the body. So way it goes back into the body. And now we have that estrogen recirculating in the body.
Gotcha.
So we want things that, like calcium D-glucarate, which helps downregulate the actions of the beta glucuronidase, so that we keep that estrogen tagged and packaged and ready for excreting out out with our stool. So that is the link to it.
Okay.
So it's one way that it's one way that we help estrogen detox. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think I took CDG a while back, but I haven't taken it for several years. So I was listening to a different training on this, and they were talking about different ways of detoxifying estrogen as well. So I'm just curious what that connection was.
For sure.
And then last but not least, I think for today's purposes, I think we've covered a lot today that we can use moving forward. But I know that our people that are out there are wanting to know more about things like prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, which is sort of this new concept and idea, digestive enzymes. I know there are questions around all that. I would love to, we're going to meet at a later time and we're going to put together an awesome little mini course or a set of videos for people that we really dive into the more digestive content of supplementation and that sort of stuff. So we'll save that for another day, but you have a few pages in your book dedicated to magnesium. And one of the things that I teach in my course is the different ways. I know Dr. Laura Bryden is a huge fan of magnesium supplementation as well. She has a blog post about, I think it's called the 8 ways that magnesium rescues hormones, right? And so magnesium is obviously deficient in our soils. And so I'd love for you to sort of talk to us about why magnesium supplementation. Is there a better type? Are you a fan of something over another when it comes to like oxide versus glycinate versus whatever? And do you think everyone should be supplementing some sort of magnesium?
Well, first of all, I can't give medical advice to individuals
Sure.
unless it's in a one-to-one consult, and no advice is right for everybody. So you have to check with your medical provider as to what's best for you. We can talk about like the different types of magnesiums, why there's different types and what they do and whether kind of preferred uses, because over 50% of the population are generally deficient in magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
And bring us back to the beginning of our conversation. Magnesium is high in a lot of plant-based foods, a lot of those dark leafy greens, nuts and seeds, right? So some of the whole foods thing, so we have to think, if we're low in consumption of that, maybe that's why a lot of us are deficient. But as you had mentioned, like even our soils are kind of deficient in some of these things. So magnesium is an element. It's a chemical element in this periodic, table of elements, and it loves to bind to things. So that means it's going to come with an oxide or a citrate or a bisglycinate, or other types of things, right? So you have different purposes. Now, the ones that are like the citrates and the oxides, those guys tend to draw a lot of water into the colon, which helps lubricate the stool, helps, pass stool, which is often taken in, when you're feeling elements of, slow moving stool. So it's helping, bring water into the colon. Mm-hmm. It's not absorbing so much into the body. So if you're looking for something to help soothe sore muscles, right, or to treat heart health, which is a big muscle, right, we're looking more for magnesium bisglycinate and maybe with a little bit of taurine, because that helps with the absorption of magnesium across the intestinal tract. Another thing to point, because magnesium loves to bind to things, it will bind to some of your medications or supplements or things like that. So I always give kind of a carte blanche. Always take magnesium, any kind, at least an hour away from any of your prescription meds, because you don't know if it's going to bind or not. Now, you could always ask your pharmacist more particulars, right? Yeah. And they would be able to help you with that. But just as a safety mechanism, that's helpful. But if there's so many things that magnesium does, over 800 things in your body, right? 300 different transactions. It's involved in so many different enzymatic transactions, and enzymes are just a way to help chemical processes happen. Whether that's making energy or that's detoxing, making a neurotransmitter, whatever. It does so many things that it's amazing. Sometimes, if we're just deficient, and it's difficult to measure, right? Yeah. If you do a serum sample of magnesium, then you're missing out on the red blood cell. Right. If you're doing the red blood cell, then you're missing out on what might be in the tissue. So it's really difficult to pinpoint whether you're deficient or not. Sometimes it's just looking at the diet and looking at the symptoms clinically and saying, well, let's give this a try. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, it is very helpful in many cases, right? Yeah. The other magnesium in migraines that you'll see is magnesium threonate. Yeah, now, magnesium threonate, once it's absorbed through the gastrointestinal tract, now it also is very absorbable and will go across our blood-brain barrier. So that's allowing you to get more magnesium into the brain, which would help with migraines. So there's things like that. So again, you have to check with your practitioner. How much? How long? What's safe? When do I take it? How long do I take it? Can I take it, every day for the rest of my life? Or do I just take, this dose for this long, right? Or do I change doses? You got to check with your practitioner on all of those things, because this is, dose, timing, duration. These things can't be given in a
Yep.
in something like this. So this is just to educate you on some of the different types and, when they might be used. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I started, it was interesting because when I saw a neurologist early on in my headache journey, and the neurologist was the first person to put me on any sort of magnesium, and he put me on magnesium oxide. And I didn't really see any like noticeable difference. It didn't necessarily help my headaches or anything else. I didn't see any sort of difference at all. But when I started working with my functional doctor, she said, "Oh, let's take that away and let's try glycinate." And so I started using magnesium glycinate. So all of this to say, every person is unique and individual. So different forms could be beneficial for different people. I also know biohacking experts out there who talk about having different types of magnesium on board too. So perhaps that's for some people as well. But the glycinate has been great for me. I've seen benefit in reduced anxiety, better sleep. I take it about an hour or so before bedtime. My mom started taking it during the pandemic, and she swears that it helped her sort of anxiety and helped her sleep as well. But it's interesting to me because I think, a lot of times people will say like, "Oh, not another supplement, like another thing." And it's
I
like, well, we
know.
have to sometimes look and see. Yes, I mean, some things are more easily tested, through the blood or when it comes to hormones, like through saliva or urine, and we can kind of see what deficiencies might be there that you might need supplementation in. But at the same time, we have to look at, even just from the perspective of our soil is not the same as it was hundreds of years ago. So what we're not getting through nutritionally could sometimes have to be supplemented. So I agree with you. Everybody, of course, should always check with their doctor and ask about it. But I think magnesium can be a very powerful supplement for a lot of people. So it's worth asking about.
Yeah, and if you want to boost the magnesium levels in like your leafy greens that you're growing, you just take like Epsom salts, which are magnesium sulfide, and
Mhm.
you put like 1 or 2 tablespoons in. You'll have to check. I think it's like a gallon of water, or like a bit larger quantity, like a bucket, right? Because you don't want to kill the plant. But this will, you're putting that into the soil, and that will help make them dark and leafy,
Mhm.
right? So this will help replenish your soil. Putting some magnesium sulfide on it, not too much though. You got to get the right ratio. So check with
Yeah.
a plant expert or something. There'll be some plant experts
But no, yeah.
that know the exact ratio to use for certain plants, and
Yeah.
bigger plants are going to absorb more than tiny seedlings, right? You got to be careful. So,
Yeah.
but magnesium sulfide, which is just our simple Epsom salts, can help replenish. I use it on my hostas, right? Because they tend to lose their green, and they'll go like pale. And if I add a little bit of magnesium into some water and give them a feed, even just once a year, it makes a big difference. They go like, "Thank you." So we're dark
Wow.
and leafy. We're dark and green again.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Very cool. I was going to ask you just personally, have you read the book Super Life?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. You'll have to check it out. So the guy that wrote
Okay.
it, is the same guy who created the shake that I drank, which is a Beachbody product, but he created Shakeology. He's known as sort of like a worldwide superfood hunter. So he goes to different
Mm.
countries and tries different foods, and that's how the ingredients for the shake are sourced. I've gotten to hear from him live a couple of times. He's now no longer with Beachbody, but he's doing like polymer research and all kinds of cool stuff. But he's probably most known for, I don't know if you ever saw the documentary series on Netflix called Down to Earth with Zac Efron.
Okay.
You have to check that out too. So it's all about like sustainable living, sustainable farming. Anyways, his name is Darren O'Lean. And again, it's called Down to Earth on Netflix, but his book is Super Life. And he opens the book with talking about he sort of does like a play on words and a pun with an apple a day keeps the doctor away. And he talks about apples and the power of apples. And I know in your book, you talk about the 2 baked apples, which I literally read out loud to my husband last night. I was like, we just got permission to make baked apples like every
Yeah.
single night. So this is just a total personal side note, but I saw that in the book and it made me think of his book and his whole chapter dedicated to just an apple and what the apple does to the body. So I was going to ask you if you've seen it, but he's got some really cool, he lives in like a yurt somewhere in California. Like he's like, when you see him or even if you find him on social media or whatever, he looks like Tarzan. Like he's totally like he looks like a jungle superfood hunter. Like, of course he would do that for a living, but I've learned so much from him on this stuff too. So reading your book reminded me a little bit of reading his book and the power of foods and stuff. So thought I'd mention it.
Awesome. Awesome. I think we could certainly make a list, Jenny, of nutrient dense foods
Yeah.
and things and variety, right? Variety of foods. You think those, all of those phytonutrients that we want to, source and tap into, we need a variety of foods. And sometimes we get, stuck in the trap of eating the same thing every single day. We need to bring some different variety in. And that's always the goal, right? You think of, oh, we've got all these food sensitivities, things we can't eat, but we have to think of all the things we can and focus on the things, the rich things that we can and enjoy life, through different means. Yeah.
Yep.
So absolutely. So I'll check those things out. I smile because I've got my son. I talk about him a lot because I'm so proud of him. He's got his master's in ag and he's growing all these gardens, but he'll grow his own grains and his wheat and barley and rye, and he'll although that's all all the things that I don't eat, but he'll grow them, he'll grind them, he'll bake his own bread with them, but they're not they're not GMO, right?
Yeah.
They're
Mm-hmm.
and then he's looking and doing research with peas and research with potatoes, and he's crossbreeding.
Cool.
I mean, he's growing plants, through the winter to be able to crossbreed them so they can put them in. And he's taken some Mexican corn and he's brought it up and he's trying to make get back to some of the basics and the interplanting of plants so that they're, the plants have friends and that type of thing. So
okay. Well then, okay.
organic
So here's something
farming.
else.
Yeah.
He's going to, okay. So tell him about this. This is actually my cousin, started this company called App Harvest.
Okay.
And they went public like a year ago. They were invested in by Martha Stewart.
Okay.
He's sort of, I don't know, like to me, he's just like my cousin who's from Kentucky and like no big deal. And then all of a sudden in the last couple of years, he got these like big time investors and they're making crazy progress. You can follow them on Instagram, App Harvest.
Okay.
I think he's also got some podcasts, but I don't know the science of it, but sounds like it would be right up your son's alley. They're doing this. They took this massive amount of land in Appalachia, Kentucky, and have turned it into this sustainable farm ground, with these greenhouses that I think, I can't remember where he went, what country he went to multiple times that has this. And so that he has replicated it here.
Oh, wonderful.
And it's all about, like, for him, he talks a lot about, if somebody in Indiana, or let's say, somebody in Indiana wants like fresh tomatoes or whatever in the winter, like they're coming from California or they're coming from somewhere else. And so it's 3 to 4 days before they get to the shelf. And he talks about how like having something in the central, like in the Midwest of the United States, is so powerful because then they can distribute in, just a day to most of the country. So anyway, check out that company and check out what they're doing. Send it to your son, because it would be really cool. If he wanted an introduction to him, I'm happy to do it. He's my cousin. So
excellent. Thanks, Jenny. That's great.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, I have to pick Ellery up soon from her camp. I promised her I would take her to the pool. So I have to like get the pool bag ready. I think we covered a lot of stuff. I mean, I think we got some good stuff to use for little clips. And is there anything that we missed that you wanted to mention?
Oh, I think you've got lots to work with. And if there's anything else, we can just run a short clip and do it, but see what see how things go, see how it pulls together. And
I will.
Yeah, good.
Cool. Well, thanks for doing this. And then I'm probably going to take some of this out and use it on a podcast episode in a couple weeks.
Okay, just share that with me and I'll push it out to my network as well. It's more like the awareness and everything, and the conversations are great. Yeah.
And then what are your thoughts on doing some sort of like live webinar?
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll talk to Dr. Jorgensen too and see, we're going to do a second interview as well. And I'll see if maybe she wanted to team up and come onto it for a little while too. But I think the more we can like put feelers out there and share this stuff, like it'll build an audience for this for sure. So my branding agent had said last week, she thought the webinar could be really powerful to build an email list or even to use as an upsell. Like if we wanted to go ahead and have a live webinar and then say, we're running a course that will take place in, we'll say October, and we're building an interest list, right? Like, so we could do it that way, or we could have some sort of introductory offer So if people wanted to get in early, it would be sort of like an early bird rate. They could save their spot. That would help us gauge interest so that, like I said before, we don't want to like create something and put all the time into it and then nobody, nobody wants it. So I thought that was a good idea. So I don't know if you want to set a time to just do the webinar and then we just kind of do like this. And I mean, I think Dr. Jorgensen too is pretty off the cuff. So I think we could probably do something like that. Or if you wanted to meet again, whatever your preference is.
Yeah, no, I'd love to meet her and do something that way. That'd be great.
Okay.
And then we'll just have to find a time that works. I know you're on some holidays, and so we're probably looking into August.
Yeah. Ellen
And
starts school mid-August, so I'll have my days a lot more open when she starts school. That would probably be my preference.
okay, why don't you shoot a couple of days that work
Okay.
for you, and then do and then we'll coordinate.
Okay,
Okay,
I'll do that.
perfect.
Sounds good. I know, I can't believe we're halfway through summer.
Yeah.
It's crazy. All right, well, I hope you have a good rest of your Monday.
Okay, you too. Take care.
All right, I'll send you an email.
Okay, hope you're feeling well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.